Nickal versus Khamzat Chimaev. Right now, who do you got? The way this game's usually played is you throw one out. It's just a popularity contest. So, but instead of doing that, let's just go one step further. Let's say we're going to bet. You're going to have to bet. Week's pay on this. Who do you got? You're kind of forced to analyze it and break it down a little bit different. I would be curious who you've got. I don't know. Ultimately, it comes down to pace. I mean, ultimately, that is the number one thing in this sport, in any form of combat. Be doing a judo match, a wrestling match, a jiu-jitsu match, doing boxing, be doing MMA. Ultimately, it comes down to, is one guy superior in pace? Can he break the other guy? Can he offer more effort and more energy in this direction than the other guy can match and swap back? I mean, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And I don't believe that you guys know enough about Bo. You'd have to take it from me. I've been watching him since he was at the cadet trials against Mark Hall when he's 15 years old. He can weaponize pace. He can hold up the entire time. He has never cracked and he has never broken. And there's not very many wrestlers ever that could say that. Even the really tough guys. They experienced it at some point along the way. Maybe that's how they learned their lesson and started training with Coach Cal in the first place. I'm just sharing with you. It didn't happen to Bo. He's able to pace himself. He's able to reset. And he can hold up. But that's the same compliment I would have to give Chimaev. And that got put to the test a couple of times. Nothing will cause an upset and nothing will make a match unravel faster than when an athlete finds himself in a match that's harder than he thought it was going to be. We had John McEnroe before the internet. This was like 1991, 1990. John McEnroe came to Oregon, Pendleton, Oregon. And he was in town, so he plays a match. He plays a match against a high school kid. The kid beat him. It was this huge news, but the internet wasn't a thing, so it was like on the radio and things. And I even turned to my dad. I remember being in the truck. I heard this on the radio. I said to my dad, "Do you think McEnroe let him win?" My dad looked at me and he shook his head. No, a guy like that would never let somebody win. And that's the truth. McEnroe goes out, he agreed to do this thing. He found himself in a match that was harder than he thought it was going to be. I mean, I'm telling you, every single upset has that ingredient. All of them. And when Chimaev was faced with that against Gilbert Burns, he responded and held up. He did not buckle and wilt. And other matches that we've seen that start going with the momentum of that one, they do. And Chimaev then got hit with that same thing in his very last one against Kamaru Usman, who Dana White just called the greatest welterweight ever. Who at the time of the fight, Kamaru Usman, world champion, ultimate fighter champion, had a win over the sitting champion who was Sean Strickland at the time. I mean, that's a hard night out. Can we agree that he didn't have time to prepare for his 8 days notice? Turns into a street fight. I mean, it was nasty, but Chimaev held up. And he was so tired. Remember that interview afterwards? He was leaning on the cage and his face was dripping. So, I mean, he was so tired, but there was nothing within him that was backing up. It's a very relevant thing to look at. Like, before you just go, oh, Chimaev's wrestling or Bo's wrestling, or you start asking me, like, well, what does third place in the Russian Nationals mean in the junior division versus what is 3 NCAA titles in America college division mean? Like, before we get into that, if you want to know how good Chimaev's wrestling is in comparison to Bo's, here's your answer. It's good enough. If you want to know how good Bo's wrestling is in comparison to, it's good enough. It's likely to nullify. You're likely to not have a single takedown. It's good enough. We've had Olympic champions that struggle in MMA to get down JV guys. But they had an understanding. They've been wrestling a while. They had an understanding. The same as we've had blue belts go out and smash black belts and Abu Dhabi champions. Don Fry comes to mind. Some of the most vicious ground and pound I've ever seen. And Don Fry, not only not at that time, but not even to this time, has any belt in jiu-jitsu. Had never done a jiu-jitsu match. In fact, he didn't even pretend it and feint like he was doing shit. It was some judo. which does not work. And he would be on that. He would, oh my goodness, Don Fry with the ground and pound. I mean, but we've seen these types of things. So one thing that stood out for me, because it's very rare that I would look at the UFC and then second guess them. It's extremely common that I will look at them, observe, okay, here's what they did and here's why they did it. I like those things. I appreciate those things. Every now and then I will bring them to you guys. I will identify them and I'll explain them to you guys. And a lot of times I'll keep them to myself. But it is very rare, whether it's publicly or privately, that I second guess them and go, hey, you guys got that one wrong. Hey, you got to rethink this. And I mean, I'm telling you, like since 1993 to now, it's rare. But I've heard promoters over the years talk about building a guy. I've heard them say that. And it's very uncommon in the UFC, but Dana has done it and he's admitted to it when he's done it. But just for example, Conor McGregor was brought up slowly. But when we look back, slowly, the fights for him to get experience and for him to get over and for you guys to be attracted to him involved Max Holloway. We just didn't know he was Max Holloway at the time. It involved Dustin Poirier. We just didn't know he was Dustin Poirier at the time, right? And so you see where this game gets a little bit more complicated. And for the majority, for every one guy that you will show me that a promoter took credit and said that he built him slow and he had a plan, I will show you 10 guys where it either got foiled or they got hurt or their contract expired and you couldn't work a deal with them by the time you had got them to where you think they need to be and you lost the fight. And I have a philosophy, you get the fight in the ring. Nothing gets in the way of that. You get the fight that you want and you get it in the ring. And we will argue and fight about everything else. Get them in the ring. Get the door shut. Rule 1. Now, I'll tell you that because there have been matches over time that would never be made. There's these walls. There's these parameters. We must operate within this. I cannot make this match because, and fill in the blank. It could be a ranking. It could be, hey, this guy lost his last one. I can't put him against this guy on a 5-fight win streak. Hey, this guy's 24. This guy's 32. I mean, it could be all sorts of reasons. I see all these walls all the time where it would never even be offered. Can't happen. I can't even call and try to make the fight. This guy isn't going to want it. I know him well enough. The media isn't going to accept it. Our pay-per-view providers aren't going to run. This is not going to, just stop. I can't do it. Well, and then I've been forced to do it. Somewhere on fight week, something happens and you got to pull a guy in. A guy that would have met all those criteria if you'd asked him at the beginning before fight camp started. All the reasons why that fight never would have been made. That phone call never would have been made, whether the media wasn't going to accept it or was it a marquee guy or the records didn't line up. Whatever it might have been gets thrown out on fight week because you end up in a jam. And a number of times when one of those fights gets made, the numbers are bigger projection-wise than the original. I could do this 20 times. I'll just do it one. Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo. I mean, that was the fight. When Chad Mendes stepped in at the last minute, it did bigger numbers than were projected. That's according to a statement made by Dana. I'm just sharing with you. So if you sit back and you go, okay, but that's the fight we all wanted to see originally. Why didn't we just do that fight? You will then oftentimes hear about some kind of barrier put up. Oh, I never got that done. That just wouldn't have worked. He wouldn't want our contract with him. I mean, there'd always be an answer. And I got to
come. We have some early results of the poll.
What do we got?
40% of our community think Bo Nickal beats Chimaev.
40% believes that Bo Nickal beats Chimaev.
Our community, yes.
40-60. That does not stun me. There appears to always be a flavor for what's new. Like, there's a couple pieces of psychology, and you'll be able to relate to it, but like when you went through high school and things like this, the new guys, if you were 4 years later, the new guys are always better, but you will hold a regard and a respect to the guys that came before you. It's just one of those things, and we'll always see that in sport. Like, people are having the argument that Wilt Chamberlain is better than LeBron. You got to stop with that. You're not complimenting Wilt, and you're not putting down LeBron. You're saying that the sport of basketball has not grown in 50 years. It's one of these really weird things, but believe me, those thoughts are out there. And I'm only saying because you have to take those things into consideration, right? It's just like the stock market. Like, you've got to know the psychology of the market, not just what are the goods and what is the management team. And so I'd only suggest for you, I'm not positive that that's going to hold up. I'm not positive that our community at large, when they have a little bit more time to think about it. I think that Chimaev is in a wildly interesting match coming up with Whitaker. And I don't know where that fight is going to go. I don't believe you can beat Whitaker and not be a number one contender. As a matter of fact, there has never been anybody to beat Whitaker who did not immediately become a number one contender and go and fight for the belt. I don't think you can beat Chimaev and not be viewed as the number one contender. And the reason I'm telling you that is because while that's true, I don't think either guy is going to draw into Duplessis or Adesanya because those fights have been done. Which is where you do have a relevance to Bo Nickal. Bo's going on 300. Bo's going on 300 for a reason. Bo's going in a feature fight for a reason. And to tie that into the thought that I was making before Ryan told me the outcome of the poll, I feel as though there's times in this sport where you'll think, this guy isn't going to do it. Yes, they will. You made up the idea of rankings. Bo never asked for rankings. Chimaev never asked for rankings. When Chimaev was ranked nothing, he wanted to fight for the belt. He had no ranking at all. He wanted to fight for the belt. Once upon a time, he had no ranking at all, still tipping at Chimaev, and he got matched up, including signed bout agreements with the number 3 guy in the world, who at that time was Leon. So I'm just sharing for you. He's not going to come out now and you go, well, look, I'm ranked number such and such, and Bo's not ranked at all, and therefore I'm not going to fight. I was like, no, man, you were just wearing those same shoes. And Bo, that would never even cross his mind. As a wrestler, I will just tell you, you go and you take on anybody in the bracket, and we don't need a discussion, and we don't need to go back and forth, and I don't need to get this signed up by my managers or talk to my wife or do anything else. Bring his ass out here and put him on the line. When you have guys like this, you've got to use it, in my opinion. There is no reason where Bo with the win and Chimaev with the win don't find each other next.